The Dallas Mavericks get a win in their season finale, but at what cost with Luka Doncic injuring his left calf, and what does it mean for his availability against the Utah Jazz in the NBA playoffs? This is Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Of course, my name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And again, you can find me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers 105.3 The Fan. The Dallas Mavericks get a 130-120 win over the San Antonio Spurs. Luka Doncic scores 26 points, but it was his absence with about 2:20 left in the third quarter that has every Mavericks fan in trepidation right now about Luka Doncic and his availability for his first-round series against the Utah Jazz. Luka Doncic injured his left calf with about 2:20 left in the third quarter and had to leave the game and did not return due to that left calf strain. He will have an MRI to determine the severity and the extent of the injury and how long and if he will be available to be with the Dallas Mavericks in their first-round series against the Utah Jazz. The Dallas Mavericks open up their 2022 Western Conference playoffs at home on Saturday at high noon when they welcome in the fifth-seeded Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and a whole host of others. But this, obviously, is about Luka Doncic and how far the Mavericks can go with or without him. Now, obviously, his injury has sent shockwaves throughout the NBA, not just because of the availability for Luka Doncic going forward in game number one and throughout the entirety of this series, but how it all went down. So let's set the backdrop for you. The Dallas Mavericks still had a shot at the third seed at the Western Conference playoffs. The Golden State Warriors were on the road taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. They were blowing out the Pelicans throughout the majority of the night in New Orleans. At one point, the Pelicans did cut the lead to 11, but they were never really threatening to beat the Golden State Warriors, where you saw Klay Thompson go off for over 40 points in his season finale for the Golden State Warriors. Meanwhile, back in Dallas, the Dallas Mavericks were in a very competitive game with the San Antonio Spurs team, who's going to be in the play-in themselves, playing a competitive game where the Mavericks had to earn the win against the San Antonio Spurs, as I mentioned, 130-120. But as the game went on, Luka Doncic playing pretty well, especially doing his thing as the game went on. But you could tell that the Mavericks were going to most likely be able to hang on and win the game, especially as it got into the third quarter when the Mavericks were able to extend the lead at multiple points over double digits. Then came about 2:24 left in the third quarter. Luka Doncic plants his left leg to try and get back up the court, and he goes down in a heap, not necessarily falling to the ground, but bending over, holding his left calf. He leaves the game, does not return. The Mavericks go on to win the game. And then we get to the end of the night and the press conference from Jason Kidd. Now, of course, a lot of tough questions asked of Jason Kidd about why he decided to leave in his starters at that juncture of the game, especially knowing how things were going with the New Orleans Pelicans and the Golden State Warriors game and what that meant for the Mavericks. Listen to Jason Kidd's explanation and tell me what you think based on how he responded to the question and whether or not his explanation is good enough.
Yeah, they were going to go their normal run for the second half because it's a week long. We'll probably play Saturday at noon. So we just felt that we'll keep them in their rotation and they'll be done by the third quarter and go from there. I thought he was cramping. I don't know what it is until I talked to Casey and him. So, but again, we weren't playing the New Orleans score. We were just trying to get better with the long layoff, and so hopefully it's not too serious.
Now, Jason Kidd says, look, we've got a long layoff between Sunday and Saturday. Got a week off. Needed to keep my guys in rotation. They weren't going to be playing for a while. We wanted to continue to get better as the game went on. We weren't necessarily paying attention, put a pin in that, to the Golden State Warriors and Pelicans matchup. So we were going to do our thing. Our guys are going to play through the third quarter with their normal rotational minutes. And then after the third quarter, figure out things going into the fourth to see where we were. Now, that's interesting because Theo Pinson, who had a really good game himself, had 16 points, played really well, especially in the fourth quarter. He had something very interesting to say himself about whether or not the Dallas Mavericks were aware of what was going on in New Orleans. Theo Pinson says, not gonna lie, we were fully aware of what was going on in New Orleans when it came to the Golden State Warriors and Pelicans score and knowing what was happening there. That's a little different than what Jason Kidd said just a few minutes prior to Theo Pinson stepping into that very same seat that Jason Kidd had just sat in and said, yeah, we weren't necessarily aware of what was going on in New Orleans, because that is two very different things that has Mavs fans a little bit confused on what's going on here. Were the Mavericks actually aware of what was happening with the Golden State Warriors in the New Orleans Pelicans game? And if they were and they knew what was happening, there was no reason to have Luka Doncic in the starters playing in the third quarter, regardless if they were trying to win the game, because their seeding was decided basically by the way that things were happening with the Golden State Warriors and the New Orleans Pelicans down in New Orleans. If you were to believe Jason Kidd and say, yeah, we weren't necessarily aware, then I don't blame him for continuing to play because they weren't necessarily paying attention and knowing what was going on. Ultimately, I don't blame Jason Kidd for continuing to play Luka Doncic in the third quarter the way that he did. Injuries, unfortunately, are part of the game, and this one is as ill-timed as possible, especially when you start thinking about the timeline that the Mavericks are having to engage in. They play at noon on Saturday, the first game of the playoffs, the actual playoffs, not the play-in, the actual playoffs. That means, in terms of the treatment time, which we're assuming Luka Doncic is going to get round-the-clock treatment to get the left calf in as best shape as possible to try and be available for the game on Saturday, that means you lose a lot of time in terms of the treatment and being able to have him go, especially knowing that if you had a chance to play on Sunday, that would have been another day of rest and recovery and rehabilitation for Luka Doncic in that calf strain. You don't have that now. And now you have to find yourself trying to get yourself prepared for a first-round series. Yes, at home. They have the advantage of being at home for the first round of the playoffs. This is going to be a massive, massive injury that could derail the Dallas Mavericks. A lot of people already think, when you look at this team, that they're a lottery group without Luka Doncic. When they do have Luka Doncic healthy and available, this is a team that could threaten to get to Western Conference Finals. That is the wild swings of potential advancement in the playoffs that we're talking about, hinging on the left calf muscle of Luka Doncic. Here's my ultimate concern, though. This is not just about the first round series. This isn't just about trying to win a series in this year's NBA playoff. This is about the long-term health, future, and concern for this superstar. Luka Doncic's Supermax kicks in at the beginning of this upcoming season. That means he's going to be on the books for over $40 million for the next 5 seasons. Think about that. Also, the last time that we saw a superstar rushed back from a calf injury was none other than Kevin Durant. And you know what happened with Kevin Durant in the NBA Finals against the Toronto Raptors. They rushed him back. He had the calf injury, and what does he do? He pops his Achilles, and the rest, as they say, is history. My concern is about the long-term health of this 23-year-old superstar who has a decade and a half of career still ahead of him. Are you willing to risk that rushing of him back to win a playoff series this year? As much as it pains me to say that, as much as it hurts me to tell you that as Mavs fans, what I do not want this team to do is to rush him back. Whether it's a grade 1 strain that requires 7 to 10 days, or grade 2 that could have him out for multiple weeks, to a grade 3 that could have him out for the entirety of the playoffs. Whatever it is, this franchise has to take ultimate care of that dude, because only that dude can carry them to where they think that they could ultimately go, not just this year, but into the future. It's not worth it if he is not nearly 100% healthy. If he's not as close to 100% healthy without the risk of potentially not only re-injuring but doing something even worse, because we've seen calf muscle injuries. They could be a precursor to something even worse. do not play him. And I do not want to say that. Trust me, I don't like it. But at the same time, this is about what you want to do to protect your investment. And if you're the Dallas Mavericks, the best way to protect that investment is to ensure that he's 100% healthy by the time he gets on the floor. And if you can't guarantee that, you do not play him if you're the Dallas Mavericks. And you'll just have to take your chances with Spencer Dinwiddie, Jalen Brunson, Dwight Powell, and everyone else on this team. Because number 77 is that valuable, not only to your present, but to your long-term future. And if there is any risk that that could potentially happen and rushing him back would do so to potentially put him at further risk, don't do it. I hope that Luka Doncic is available to play in game number 1. But if he's not, the Mavericks with Spencer Dinwiddie and others are going to have to find a way against a very talented yet flawed and at times turmoil-ridden Utah Jazz basketball team. But if they can get Luka Doncic back and ensure that they are doing everything that they can to prevent further injury from happening, then you play him. If there's even a shred of idea that you can't, then you don't. His long-term future and the investment that he is for your long-term plans toward winning a championship down the road, not just this year, but beyond that, is worth him sitting down if you absolutely have to. We'll have further update on Luka Doncic once he has his MRI concluded to determine where he will be. But for now, that's what his injury means for the Mavericks going forward. This is Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Again, my name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. We'll talk to you later. Peace.